Live from the NBC News radio broadcasting studios of KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, and 106.5 FM, located in beautiful, raining, sunny California. It's not sunny here, it's just raining hard. Thanks for tuning into The Water Zone. I'm your host, Rob Starr. Our other co-host, Mr. Mike Barron, is taking it easy these days. He's actually catching up on some sleep with his legs up, and he's enjoying a little bit of time off, which he deserves. And I did bring in somebody else to tag along with me, Mr. Chris Davey. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing very well today.
Turn your mic on. He's a newbie.
Now the mic's on. I'm doing very well today, Rob. Thanks very much.
And just so everybody knows, Chris also works for the Toro company, and he's a manager of products such as...
Right. In my role, I take care of all the hydraulic products for the Toro company. So if water runs through it, I manage that product.
All right. So and then we do have, this is Ag Week as well, so we have Ms. Ingy Bisconer and Mr. Paul McFadden. But a couple of things. Paul knows the answer to this, but I'm going to ask Chris because he's the new guy.
Yeah.
You know what today is?
Rob, I do happen to know what today is. It's March 22nd, but more than that, it's the United Nations World Water Day.
Absolutely, and that's a special thing. The World Water Day is an annual observance that's done on the 22nd. And that was commissioned by the United Nations. It's also used to advocate for the sustainable management of freshwater resources. World Water Day is celebrated all around the world at a variety of events. We can't go to one because we're working, unfortunately. They can be educational, theatrical, musical, lobbying in nature. And the day also includes campaigns to raise money for different water projects. It's the first World Water Day designated by the United Nations and was commemorated in 1993. So it goes back kind of a long time. And there's a couple things that people should know about this. Just some facts and figures about it. You know, globally, there's over 80% of the wastewater generated by society flows back into the ecosystem without even being treated or reused. That's a lot.
That's a lot of water.
And 1.8 billion people use a source of drinking water contaminated with feces, putting them at risk of contracting cholera, dysentery, typhoid, and polio. Unsafe water, poor sanitation, and hygiene causes 842,000 deaths each year. That's according to the World Health. And
that's some sobering facts.
Very sobering facts. So anyway, it's observed on March 22nd, which is today, so there's a lot of things happening on that. And one more thing about locally, what's coming up for events before we get into the news. April, you know what April is? I didn't tell you the answer to this one. So you have that look on your face. It's Earth Day month.
Yes, it is.
And there's a lot of Earth Days by water agencies. And what's locally around California, at least in the areas where we're broadcasting from, the general population. On April 7th, Cucamonga Valley Water District has theirs. It's going to be from 10 to 2. Next one is the city of Corona on April 7th as well. That's a Saturday. April 11th through 13th, Chino Basin Water Conservation District has, they're celebrating that, and it's a 3-day educational thing as well. It goes from Wednesday through Friday. April 19th, Inland Empire Utilities Agencies has theirs. It's on a Thursday from 4 to 7 p.m. April 20th, Western Municipal Water District from 3 to 7 p.m. That's in Riverside. And Sustainable Claremont, which is going to be on April 22nd from 9 a.m. to 4. That's a Sunday, which is the only Sunday one, which is kind of strange. I didn't think people were going to do it on a Sunday. And then April 28th is Eastern Municipal Water District, and that's in the city of Paris. So that's from 11 to 3. So just for the local listeners, those are the things that are going to happen. Pretty decent events. Chris and I are probably going to be in most of those.
Right, at most of those.
And so that'll be good. In fact, the one in Cucamonga Valley Water District, they're having a special letting the Water Zone people be their master of ceremonies for this year's event, so we're excited about that.
Yeah.
And everything else.
Just to add a little bit of focus to the World Water Day and the Earth Day events in April, right? It's it's meant to provide some exposure, have people think about water as more than something you just drink or to provide basic hygiene for yourself, right? Look at it as more of in a broader perspective, looking at how vital it is for creating jobs throughout the world in agriculture and other supporting industries, looking at economic, social, and human development issues. It is a very broad subject, and I think it's great that the United Nations has this date set aside just so we can have some focus on those things.
Should you wash your car on that day?
You should probably not.
We think they'll get mad at us if we have a protest and have that around the country. I don't know. It's something very remarkable to me is you go to these water conferences all year round, and what's the first thing you get when you walk in there?
A bottle of water.
A bottle of water. So don't understand that. Chris, are you on today?
I'm sure. I'm right here.
Hey, so we have the most famous purveyor of Maven's Notebook, Miss Chris Austin. Chris, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. So it's raining down in Southern California, is it?
Absolutely.
Well,
which is nice.
It was raining up here. I'm in Sacramento this week. And
Ah.
It was raining up here this morning pretty hard, but we came out of the conference today, and, well, we have blue sky and sun and little breeze, so it's looking nice up here.
Was the
It's interesting, the big question, are we having the March miracle? That's been, the headline in the news. And yes, this precipitation certainly has been helpful, but it's interesting to note we kind of have the same pattern that we had last year in a sense. With this rainfall, Sacramento is going to be up to about 87% of their normal precipitation. However, the snowpack in the Sierras is only going to go up to about 50%. So again, we're seeing what the scientists have said is going to start happening. We're seeing more rain and less snow. Last year when we had the record precipitation, we had record rainfall in Northern California, but it was not a record snowpack by like about a third less off the record snowpack. So we're definitely starting to see what the climate scientists have been telling us we're going to see: less snow and more rain.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we certainly need the rain here. Unfortunately, people up in Santa Barbara, Ventura County, are having a bad time because they still have all that, the runoff stuff with the
Recent
from
fires.
the fires and stuff, and that's pretty horrendous for them. They keep having to evacuate their homes and losing homes, and I don't know. I don't know why people buy places that are prone to those things, and they know it's there, like living near the ocean when there's floods, and fuck. Beats me.
Well,
I don't understand that, but
there's danger in a lot of places, and a lot of places maybe you wouldn't think. Actually, in some of these housing developments that they build in Southern California, we're very smart about how to build on that wildland interface.
right.
You have these new housing developments that are covered by this green belt. They're surrounded by the green belt, and the fire goes up to the edge of the green belt, and the fire helicopters come and knock that fire down. And in the 20 years that I've been living in the Santa Clarita Valley, we've had a lot of fires in our area, but in terms of we have not lost a house in a new housing development the whole time I've lived there from a wildfire coming in, because they built them so they keep them out. Where you get the property loss is where people that aren't on these developments, they're in the canyons, nestled in the trees.
Right.
Really beautiful properties, but really anywhere in California, if you're in a rural type property, you have wildfire risk, and after wildfires comes the mudslide.
Well, I remember in the papers, for all of us who own our homes, in the paperwork to buy the home, they have a clause in there about the 1,000-year flood, or the 100-year flood, I should say. And so everybody kind of knows, hey, this could happen within the 100 years, and, your home's going to get washed away. And
well, like down in the San Bernardino area, there's a lot of development that's happened on these alluvial fans, which, if you understand what an alluvial fan is, it's water that's come down out of the mountains, and it spreads out across the valley. So you have these nice sort of properties that overlook the valley, but really they're quite a flood risk. You probably wouldn't realize that. You think it's a desert, it doesn't rain here much,
No.
but when it rains, it can really rain, and it can really cause problems. Southern California has flood issues too. We're just not really aware of them.
no, that's true. So what happened up at your conference this week?
Oh, I am at a great conference this week. It's called the California Water Policy Conference, and they really set up some very interesting panels, and they get some really divergent set of views on the panels, and we talk about things. We ended the day today with a panel on equity and justice in water, and it was quite interesting. We think of things that have happened, as 50 years ago, 100 years ago, as, well, that's past, that's history. But, that's really not true. There are so many things that happened, and there's just conditions that have continued. You think about the gold rush area. Who thinks, gold rush really affects us anymore? But it really does. We have mercury, still coming out of abandoned mines, and it's, mercury in the fish in the delta and across whole California really is an issue, and that's from the gold rush era. And, there are just a lot of things that have happened to the disadvantaged communities and the populations, that they've lived in, that, kind of some, ugly things, in California state history that have happened, that have sort of pushed these they push these people into these low-income communities where there's, where they don't want to provide services, just, set them all off over there. And although these things sort of happened back in the early 1900s, say, even the 50s into the 60s, it's not that things, maybe we don't have those policies anymore, but the people still live in those disadvantaged communities. And it was really very interesting. We had a woman from the Community Water Center who is just, the Community Water Center works for the Central Valley towns, where mostly farm workers, where they have to drink some really brown water comes out of their faucet, and they can't use it for drinking or for, they can only use it for limited things. They pay incredible amounts. She was saying sometimes $250 a month in water that they can't drink, and they have to go bring water in from a store. I mean, and these are the very poorest people that we have in our society. The farm workers that pick our plants, and the plants get better water than the farm workers. It's really sad.
Yeah.
But that was a very interesting panel that we closed with, and we had the director of Department of Water Resources, Carla Namus. She kicked off the day with a speech. So she talked about all the things that the Department of Water Resources is doing, and the different programs that they have. And so it's been a really good day.
Well, you were talking about the the wildfires that we've had all over California. That intensifies and impacts the water quality, not only to forested watersheds, but to everybody else. All of that stuff. They have to change the recipe on how to purify the water from that.
Oh yeah, it's between 60 to 80% of the state's water comes from our forested watersheds, the Sierra Nevadas and the Coast Range and other areas around. And we have not taken very good care of our forests, so it's a big issue. When that fire comes through, it clears out the trees. There's sediment and water quality issues, and if it's a highly populated area, it's a lot of toxic stuff. When a house burns and you see nothing there, okay, all that stuff in the house, it went somewhere. Okay, it didn't just vaporize. Well, it did in a sense. A lot went up in the smoke. A lot went running off into the waters and the streams and the waterways. I mean, fire is very destructive.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's going to be a bigger challenge in California. We had a gentleman who's the executive director of the California Nevada sector of AWWA last week, and they're going to come back on and talk about water quality throughout California and what some of the problems are that people don't even realize is happening. You talked about the people up in Central California where the water's coming out brown. They got to, everybody thought Flint, Michigan was terrible, but there's a lot in California that's just as bad, which is going to be a big problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we really need to start addressing these problems. And a lot of times the problem is not that we don't know what to do. I mean, we know what to do. We know how to deliver clean drinking water to people's houses. There's no question about that.
Right.
It just takes money. It just takes funding and political will.
Yeah, that most of all. Paul, did you have a question?
We're not going to stand for this.
Paul, did you have a question? Is Paul on the line? Paul McFadden?
No, I'm on the line, Rob, but I can't hear Chris.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I thought you were chiming in. I didn't want to cut you off or any of that. Apologize. Also, Chris, I heard that LA opposes the $17 billion tunnels if its residents must pay more than their fair share.
Oh, yeah, boy, did Metropolitan get everybody in an uproar up north. Yeah, they talked, we're still arguing about these tunnels. And, the state came out about 6 weeks ago and said, maybe we'll just build one tunnel and 2 intakes now. And we'll come back and do the second tunnel and the other intake when we have funding for that. And so Metropolitan had a board meeting, and some of their board of directors said, well, what if we build the whole thing? Because the Central Valley is going to need water, and so basically they're like, if we build this, people will come to us for water.
Mm-hmm.
And if we build it, then we want to make sure that, we're going to be able to control the price that we charge people for delivering them water through our tunnel system and all. So, I mean, that's got everybody in an uproar. And basically the city of Los Angeles said, well, we'll pay for our share, but we don't want to pay for this second tunnel and this third intake. We just want to pay our share. We don't want to be financing this, this other project. So we'll see. That's not a water district necessarily. No. That's the city of L.A., right, which does own Department of Water and Power, but I don't know if the city council's decision, means that DWP has to follow that. I imagine it does, but I can't say for sure.
If you had a look in your water crystal ball, when do you think the decisions on all these tunnel things is going to be decided?
Well, I think that it really has to be decided before Governor Brown leaves office. And I think that there's a real feeling that needs to happen, not just for Governor Brown's legacy, but more so, I think, because we just don't know what the incoming governor is going to think about this, and none of the candidates for governor have come out and said, "Oh, we're in favor of the tunnel."
No, they're not talking. They're not talking about it.
Exactly. They know it's kind of a hot, and the few that have basically indicated that they're not in support of that project. Now, they're not elected yet, and things can change, and there's a lot of nuances into this question of the tunnels. So maybe they might change their mind, but right now, none of the governor candidates are saying, we want to go build tunnels. So
we should have a contest. And no, seriously, we should have a contest. Somebody can win a $100 gift certificate. We'll think about how we can put that together. Maybe announce it next week on a date. People can write in and give us a date, and we'll see if they're right, and we'll set a deadline. By the time the next governor comes in, and see if anybody can come up with the date. Nothing to lose, $100 to gain, and they can use the card to go wherever they want, do whatever they want.
A great idea.
Yeah, we do that.
A great idea. I'm sitting here thinking just what a juxtaposition it is in this day and age and in the state of California, Chris, when you mention about people in our own state here on water systems and not getting quality water, right? You think of those things normally other places in the world, right, where people have to spend energy, time, and effort in acquiring water every day, right, for drinking, and then when they get it, it's not always of good quality, and so they have to deal with the health impacts of using contaminated water. It's something you think about in third world countries, not in the state of California.
Well,
yeah, but unfortunately, there's about 1 million people in the state of California that live that life. Most of them in the Central Valley.
Right.
And most of them farm workers, and unfortunately, most of them are people of color, which is really, not. It's just really a very sad thing.
Well, to me, it shouldn't matter what race, religion, creed they are. They're human beings, and
Exactly.
we need to fix what we got broken. And
Well, and when you think about the fact that if you don't have a lot of money because you work at a job like a farm worker job, and then you have to go out and buy bottled water,
yeah,
it's quite a significant expense for someone who's living at the poverty level. I mean, we should not allow this, and we do have some legislation that is pending in the state legislature that would add a surcharge of 95 cents on every household water bill across the state of California that would solve this problem, and it would create a really reliable funding stream so that we could really attack this problem. But the water agencies are really fighting this tax, so they don't want to collect this tax. This is something they're going to have to set up systems to collect and submit to the state, and they're saying there are better ways to solve this. Although we've been dealing with this problem for decades, and we have not solved it yet. So I would question, okay, what is that better way? But this is the thing that's on the table now, and we'll see. We should probably know in the next couple of weeks if it's going to pass.
Yeah. It's kind of sad when you hear the stories of people who have to drink that kind of water and what it does to children and affects them and their health growing up. And I think this country has a good heart, but I also think that a lot of people are freaking out about big government, and this is another thing that's going to have to be created, and who's going to run it, who's going to who's going to do the management of it. Is all the money going to go to this thing, or is it going to be diverted to some other projects? I mean, that's always the question. At least it's been this way now for the last couple of years, and more every day. People are questioning everybody who has a solution or an idea for a solution. It gets challenged, and I think there should be discussion on both sides or all sides to what's what. But we got to stop politicizing a lot of things and just go for the things that are going to help humanity and make us a better life and a better people in this world. Because it's we think we have it tough and as bad as what you're saying up in Central California. There's places in Nicaragua where people have to walk 3 miles just to get a gallon of water and schlep it back, and the water isn't as clean as as they want it to be. But that's the way the world is, and it's kind of a shame when you only got less than 2% of all the water in the world that you can drink. That's it.
Yeah.
And
I really think we need to find a way to address this problem.
Yeah.
One way or another. I don't know if this water tax, as the agencies are saying, if that's the answer. The water agencies say no. A lot of the contaminants there are really as a result of irrigated agriculture that's been going on in the valley since the early 1900s. Fertilizers and all this stuff that seeps into the groundwater. So the farmers have some culpability here, but not necessarily the farmers that are farming there right now, but perhaps their ancestors. So, the farmers are saying, well, it's not entirely our fault. We've inherited this problem. But again, we just have people pointing fingers at who should come up with the money. We can solve this problem. We know how to deliver clean drinking water to people. We do know how to do that.
Absolutely.
It doesn't take money.
I think what's an idea for a show, we've had people on from the legislature and everywhere else. I think we should get 2 opposing people and have a debate and have them come on the show, and then we can ask questions. I mean, we got Ingy and Paul and Chris and myself. We can come up with the challenges to the questions and see what they say. Because when you talk to each people individually, the story sounds great, but then when it gets into the legislation, it kind of goes nowhere, and everybody starts fighting again. But there's got to be, again, we're smart enough to know it, like you said, how to deliver clean water, how to process it, how to treat it. There's no reason they can't come up with a solution. Anyway.
Right.
So
it just takes money and political will.
Okay. Well, Chris, it's time for our commercial break. We appreciate you coming on and updating us what's going on, and we'll talk to you next week. And have a happy World Water Day from us.
And happy World Water Day to you
and
all the
and if you want to stick around, we have Dr. Glenda Humiston going to be on, and you're more than welcome to stay on and participate if you'd like.
Okay, well, I think I'll listen from my nifty speaker that Inge gave me.
They're cool. So, anyway, thanks a lot.
Thanks,
be back.
Chris.
We'll be back in a minute. Stick around for more of the Water Zone, and we're going to continue with our Ag Show. So, stick around. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for a place to buy your landscape and gardening items? Come visit us at Site One Landscape Supply. We offer a large and quality selection of irrigation, landscape, and outdoor living products such as Toro's water-efficient precision nozzles. Site One Landscape Supply has over 30 locations right here in Southern California, and we are the largest national wholesale distributor of landscape supplies in the United States. Site One's knowledgeable and friendly staff is equipped to help you with all your landscape, irrigation, and outdoor living projects. Whether you're redoing your backyard into a drought-tolerant garden or creating a water-efficient landscape for your client, Site One has everything you need, including the latest in water-saving technologies, drought-tolerant plants for your yard, irrigation supplies, fertilizer and weed control products, landscape accessories, hardscape products, outdoor lighting, and much, much more. Visit SiteOne.com to find a store near you or stop by today. Site One. We are stronger together.
Did you know that an irrigation system that has a leak of just 1/32 of an inch in diameter, that's the thickness of a dime, wastes 6,300 gallons of water per month or 75,000 gallons per year? Well, with more solvent cement experience than anyone on the planet, Weldon formulates their products not just to meet a standard, but to exceed it. Weldon products are designed to provide even greater safety margins, often able to make up for common mistakes or less than ideal installation conditions, reducing the chance for leaks and costly callbacks. Weldon's invention of solvent cement over 60 years ago revolutionized the piping industry. From day one, Weldon has led the industry with their broad range of high-performing solvent cements, primers, and cleaners, bringing unique solutions to professional contractors and homeowners. Along the way, Weldon has earned the loyalty of millions of professional contractors who trust their products and depend on their outstanding customer service, live technical hotline, troubleshooting services, and free training. And because they care about the environment, Weldon was the first manufacturer to develop and offer a complete line of low VOC cements. Their hottest formulation is Weldon 750 Hot Weld, a one-step, fast-setting blue PVC solvent cement specifically formulated for superior, long-term, trouble-free performance. So whether you're a professional contractor or just a backyard do-it-yourselfer, choose Weldon, the trusted global leader in solvent cements for leak-free plastic piping systems. To learn more about their complete line of products or technical training, visit the web at www.weldon.com or call their technical service hotline at 877-477-8327.
Hey, welcome back to the Water Zone on KCAA 1050 AM, and hope everybody's having a great day. Now we got a special treat because it's their week anyway. Miss Inge Bisconer and Mr. Paul McFadden, and they're going to bring on some great person for Ag Week. So go for it, guys.
Thank you, Rob. We're really pleased to celebrate World Water Day on the Water Zone with you and Paul and Chris and Chris Austin, and with a perfect guest for this venue because Dr. Glenda Humiston, the Vice President of UC Ag and Natural Resources, is our guest, and she has worked all over the world, we'll find out. We're going to be talking about some neat stuff about what the University of California is doing, what she's been doing, kind of around the world under a couple of different presidents. And
she's an amazing woman. I was reading her bio earlier. Yeah. Unbelievable. So I'm very excited to listen.
Okay, Glenda, now that we've set the table, you're going to have to take us by storm.
Yeah,
Welcome to the
once
show,
I get
Glenda.
past blushing, that was really kind work.
And my partner Paul is on the line. Paul, hello.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And I'm excited for the interview and to hear your thoughts on World Water Day. And I know our listeners are excited as well. So let's move forward.
Yeah, we'll dive right into it. So for our listening audience, just to give a little more about Glenda's background, she's the vice president of the University of California's Ag and Natural Resources. She was born in California but raised on a cattle ranch in Colorado. And she's come to us with more than 25 years of experience working on public policy development and program implementation supporting sustainability, which is a great topic for World Water Day. She's had time in the Peace Corps in Tunisia. She served under President Clinton and Obama in various positions. She wrote a widely acclaimed guidebook on access to capital that's led efforts to bring rural issues to the forefront of the state's economic summit and policymakers throughout California. She earned her PhD at UC Berkeley in Environmental Science, Policy and Management in 2009 with a research focus on the U.S. Farm Bill policy, and that's something we want to talk about tonight as well. She has a master's degree in International Ag Development from UC Davis and a bachelor's degree in Animal Science from Colorado State University. So, Glenda, tell us how this background got you to this position of Vice President of UC A&R, and what exactly does that position do?
Well, in many ways, this position is kind of something that all of my past work has led up to. It's an amazing position. A&R is an umbrella organization statewide whose mission is to bring the power and knowledge of the University of California to all the citizens of California. So we have researchers on campus as well as researchers out in the field. We have offices in every county of California. We've got research extension centers scattered all over the state. We host literally thousands of research projects. We fund some. We have 11 statewide programs and institutes, a couple of which people are probably more familiar with is our 4-H youth development program, but also Master Gardeners. California is the home of the Integrated Pest Management Program, which we manage, not only for California but for the Western states. We have a Water Research Institute, Nutrition Policy Institute, and several other programs that really focus on making sure the citizens of California get to take advantage of all of the knowledge and research and public service opportunities from the University of California, which is California's land-grant university.
Wow, that's just incredible. I'm a UC alum, and I didn't realize that you did that much stuff, and I'm learning more every day. So we'll dive into a little more about UCTV a little bit later, but at this point I'll hand it back over to Paul to talk about World Water Day.
Thank you. As a longtime 4-H'er and married to a master gardener, thank you for all that you're doing on the front end of the interview. I appreciate that. As we've mentioned a couple of times, today is World Water Day. What is in your opinion, what is the situation with the world's water today, and what is the UC system doing to help educate or help improve water for citizens and farmers and obviously for the environment?
You know, that's a great question, and it's a particularly important question for California because in many ways, California is a bit of a microcosm, a laboratory for the world's water. We're dealing with drought, we're dealing with floods, we're dealing with moving water around in various systems, trying to get water to people, to agriculture. We've got climate change, extreme weather. We got it all happening here in California. In fact, I think there's even a few glaciers left up there in the Sierra, as well as the desert, the desert down deep. So we've got research projects literally looking at every single aspect of that here in California to find solutions here. But a lot of our researchers work internationally, too, with colleagues from all over the world looking at these issues and trying to find solutions to those challenges.
Well, I know that you were one of 6 higher education witnesses that spoke before the U.S. House of Representatives, the Committee on Agriculture, about the importance of university ag research and innovation last June. And then you just spoke at the World Ag Expo in Tulare this last February about the 2018 Farm Bill. So tell us about how the Farm Bill works for an ordinary California citizen and what we all hope to achieve in it for California and for the nation.
Yeah, as you mentioned in my bio introduction, I did my PhD research on the Farm Bill. It is truly one of the most fascinating pieces of legislation that goes on in Washington, D.C., and always has been, largely because it has never really been partisan. The issues are revolving around urban versus rural, different regions versus other regions, commodities, and you end up having Republicans and Democrats on both sides of almost every single issue. It makes for some very strange bedfellows, and that goes for the interest groups too. It's a big omnibus piece of legislation that happens every 5 years. Most folks would say the modern Farm Bill was begun back in the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl, the combination of which really knocked the U.S. for a loop, to put it mildly. And we had to start finding solutions to issues, and a lot of those issues were rural and agriculture and access to food. So over the decades, it's evolved from largely trying to stabilize agriculture in our nation and deal with some of the environmental and transportation infrastructure type issues related to it, to through the 50s and 60s, the Green Revolution, new ways of doing production. The 70s, we discovered that some of the Green Revolution, with more focus on chemicals and irrigation and fertilizers, was creating a few environmental issues. 1985 Farm Bill, we got a conservation title. Back in the 80s and 90s, we saw much more funding going to the nutrition programs. And up until like the 2008 Farm Bill was a particularly interesting one, because for California, that was the first time we got a specialty crop title in the Farm Bill. So at this point, the Farm Bill is 10 titles. It includes forestry, research, rural development is a large one, conservation programs, farm service, animal plant health inspection service, food, nutrition, consumer sciences, and on and on and on. It's really just kind of an amazing omnibus bill that touches every single American every single day of their life, and yet most of them don't even have a clue what it is.
Well, it's always amazing when you can find something that both sides of the aisle can, join hands and agree to. As you were saying, it's really nonpartisan, maybe urban versus rural, but you think about it.
Don't think that doesn't mean there aren't some really fascinating fights. Because what you'll end up with is a Republican and a Democrat from the Midwest who are worried about grain fighting against a Republican and a Democrat against, say, Florida, who's worried about citrus. And they're trying to make sure each of their different farmers are taken care of. And when you've got one pie, those slices, how you slice them, somebody wins and somebody loses sometimes.
Everybody wants to get their share of the dollars. But at the end of the day, we all eat, and that should be something that we all agree on. So it's good to hear. And I know, Paul, you were just recently in D.C. working on the Farm Bill, and maybe you can add some color to this and what you just recently heard.
It was fascinating. I was there for the Irrigation Association's legislative fly-in, and we met with a number of senators and congressmen and their staffs on determining where we're at with the Farm Bill. And I know that there's a lot of things and a lot of moving parts, and especially on the House, it seemed to me that they're much more receptive, along with a few senators, much more willing to engage and listen with suggestions and so forth. But the latest information that I have, and I'd be interested, Linda, what you have heard, there seems to be some stalling, if you will, on the Senate side, which I was told runs about 2 or 3 weeks behind the House in this area. but there seems to be some stalling there in terms of putting ideas together to kind of match up with things that are done in the House. And I'm curious what your sources are telling you.
Yeah, I was back in Washington, D.C. myself a couple weeks ago for a fly-in for our Council on Agricultural Research, Extension, and Teaching. We had a delegation of about 12 people back there and split up into 2 or 3 teams and managed to visit about 33 offices. And believe me, if you do that in a couple of days, you are exhausted at the end of the day.
That's unbelievable. That's unbelievable.
But
a lot of offices.
Yeah, we asked all those offices what was going on with the Farm Bill, and it was pretty amazing. Most folks, both Republican and Democratic offices, felt like it was a real toss-up. Most of them felt like there might be a markup, which means an initial hearing and discussion of the Farm Bill in the House this spring, possibly one in the Senate, but that frankly the Farm Bill itself was likely not to get done until after the election because of so much else on the docket for Congress, as well as just frankly there's some political volatility there that a lot of folks don't want to deal with in an election year. And it's pretty normal for the Senate to be a few weeks or even a month or so later than the House. That's fairly common in past farm bills. But right now, with budget and all the uncertainty over trade and tariffs and everything else, people are just really unsure what's going on. Plus, there's a lot of volatility over funding for the nutrition program. That's what's really holding up a lot of the discussions between the House and the Senate.
The one segment that I was really focused on, one of 3 items, was the EQIP program, the Environmental Incentive Program, Quality Incentive Program, and how we can help U.S. farmers become more efficient with their water usage, be better stewards of our water usage. And it sounded like that was being looked at very favorably. Have you heard anything along those lines?
Yeah, actually, EQIP, Environmental Quality Incentives Program, is a very popular program, again, in a bipartisan way. A lot of the Farm Bill programs really are. I think it's going to probably do okay in the Farm Bill, and believe me, I hesitate to do that. For 20 years now, I've advised people not to ever prognosticate on what the Farm Bill is going to end up being at the end, because it'll surprise you every time. But, yeah, EQIP will probably come out okay. It's not quite as volatile as, say, the rural development programs, which have been on the chopping block during this administration. One of the other issues we're really looking at is the research funding. You know, the research funding, agricultural research, has just been in a steady decline for decades. China is now spending almost double the money the U.S. does on agricultural research. And when you look at what that does for productivity, it's a direct correlationship. Their productivity is raising rapidly while ours is, you know, relatively stagnant at this point.
Well, one thing I've been happy to see in the Farm Bill or in the EQIP program is that we're starting to use the language of productivity, that we're wanting to fund and modernize our agricultural practices and, you know, water irrigation efficiency in particular to be a term called water use efficiency rather than just water conservation. And that means we're getting more crop per drop and getting more productivity. I know other countries are doing that, and I've felt strongly for, you know, over a decade now that we really should be rephrasing that. And I think that's starting to pick up. And would you agree? Have you heard anything about that, or are you really dialed in on that at all?
Yeah, no, I saw that language as well, and I think you're right. You are right on. That's extremely important because conservation just assumes that there's some innate value in not using water, when the reality is our food requires water to be grown, and what we do need to be looking at is that efficiency. That's where a lot of our work throughout California is on, you know, given that we've got 400-some crops here and, you know, drought conditions frequently, it's a big issue.
Yeah. Well, let's move to water infrastructure. That's always a nice topic, you know, the conveyance, the surface storage, the groundwater. We know that that's critical for the entire United States, and especially here in California, to sustain our ag and environmental and urban use. What do you see in your crystal ball happening on that front, maybe from both the federal and state legislative standpoints?
Well, I think your previous guest spoke a little bit about the tunnels and some of that, so I won't spend too much time there. Clearly, there's interest in California in storage. I mean, we passed a bond. There's discussion about that, but there's a lot of details to be worked out. There's still a lot of disagreement on what that's going to look like and where it's going to be. My understanding is the omnibus bill to keep the government functioning, the 17-18 fiscal year, that was, I'm not sure it was voted on yet, or it was just voted on. The president hasn't signed it, but he's going to soon. It's very, very close. Did include some funding for storage here in California. I don't know all the details on that, but clearly we've got to find ways to do both surface storage and groundwater. In fact, that's a really huge project we've been working on this past year, is facilitating much more effective groundwater recharge to help us, store that water in the wet years so that we've got it for dry years.
Right, right. And Paul, you were just in Sacramento on some of these topics. What did you hear?
Well, it's interesting because there was a very interesting speaker at this CII conference, Dr. Helen Dahlke from UC Davis, who's studying groundwater recharge, and some of her recent research with the amount of water that left the state because the permitting process was a hurdle for local folks, both in water districts or farmers or whomever, to get water back through any conveyance system to allow them to flood their ground. And I was just curious, is that an area of focus, streamlining the approval process to allow us as a farming community, let's say, to flood our fallowed fields and that allow that groundwater to percolate back into the aquifer? Is that something that the UC system is looking at as well?
Absolutely. In fact, we hosted about 75, 80 people at a meeting, co-hosted it with California Forward and some other partners this last fall in preparation for the California Economic Summit. One of the three major goals of the California Economic Summit has right now is to develop, and we're using develop in a very broad term, 1 million acre-feet of water additionally each year for the next 10 years. And improved groundwater storage is a real key issue there. What we did is we brought together folks from local government, land use decision makers, water management agencies, and this year we added in flood management too, because part of the problem is those three different entities, land use, water management, flood management, they really aren't talking together as much as they could or should, and some of their rules and regs are contradictory to each other. So we identified some specific recommendations on that and presented those at the State Economic Summit, and they're now moving forward. We're going to have an additional follow-up meeting to that later this year to keep the momentum.
That's excellent news. I think the conferences and lectures that I've attended, I think your observations are crystal clear, because I've seen the same kind of things happening, and everybody is kind of doing their own thing, if you will, and just providing these folks with a forum where we can sit down and discuss these things rationally and work together to solve these problems in a bipartisan way. It's going to benefit everybody, the urban folks, the farming community, and the environment. I think that's
absolutely
critically important.
In fact, our recommendations included groundwater recharge in urban areas as well as ag lands. And just to give you a sense of how much interest there is in this and how exciting it is. Scientific American ranked the idea of improving groundwater recharge projects on ag lands as one of 2015's top 10 big ideas that will change the world.
Wow. That's refreshing to hear. I'm encouraged.
It seems like such a no-brainer, but we weren't really doing it. I mean, it's just hindsight's always 20/20, of course. But yeah, irrigate efficiently during the irrigation season so that we don't over-irrigate and get the bad stuff into the groundwater. But in the winter, when we have our big storms, that's when we need to deliberately flood irrigate our lands and recharge that savings account, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the beauty of it is, if you do it right, you get a lot of other side benefits as well.
Such as?
Boy, we could talk about that all.
Wildlife habitats and obvious ones.
Wildlife habitat. Yeah.
Plus, also the kind of land that you're putting water on to recharge groundwater, particularly in high water events, is probably reducing flooding in a place you don't want flooded, like a city.
Sure. Hey, before we run out of time, I want to make sure we touch on this report that you commissioned that I learned about last year when you were the keynote at a conference I was speaking at as well, the RCD conference, and it was about a report you commissioned to define the value of California's environmental land value, similar to how we put a value on ag or industry. You commissioned a report to put a value on what our just natural environment was worth. Tell us about that. That was fascinating to me.
Well, there's two things going on. We commissioned a report 5 years ago on the economic value and jobs related to our California working landscape, because I just am very frustrated when I hear people say ag is only 2% of the state's GDP. Why do we care about it? Well, the reality is, if you look at California's working landscape, the value in 2012 was over $318 billion in direct sales alone. We're currently updating that report, putting together a blue ribbon task force to do so, because they really underestimated some stuff in the early report. When the new one comes out later this year, it's going to show that California's working landscapes are probably somewhere around 40% of the state's economy. And that doesn't even touch on ecosystem services, which is the other report we just commissioned and released at the State Economic Summit this past November, where we really looked at, we commissioned a report, a great team worked on it, put it together, and it gives some review of opportunities, some recommendations on how California can really pursue ecosystem services, different ways of funding, et cetera, related to water supply, ag production, climate stability, recreation and tourism, and habitat biodiversity. And again, the really wonderful thing is often you get multiple benefits amongst those 5 areas by finding ways to have them work together.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's really inspiring. It just sounds like, hey, there's a lot of problems. We always hear about the problems, but there's a lot of good work being done to solve them. And that's so thank you for the work that you're doing there. Rob, do we have time to hear a little bit about UCTV? Where are we at in the program? Another minute or two?
We have a minute. We have a minute, but also I'd like to let our audience know how they can get in touch with her.
Yeah. Okay.
Just you're fascinating.
Actually, we're pretty easy to find. If you do a Google search or whatever your search engine is on UCANR, Ag and Natural Resources, you'll jump right to our website. And at that point, you can find information on all of our programs. You can click on your own local county and have contact info for the specialists and advisors there and how to hook up with the programs. It's really easy to find us. Just Google UCANR.
Excellent. Well, let's bring this up.
Brenda, thank you so much for being our guest and for the good work that you do. We really look forward to hearing more from you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenda. It's been a pleasure.
That wraps
Thank
it
you
up.
for all your hard work.
Absolutely. Great guests that you brought on, Ingy and Paul. We appreciate that a lot. And we'll catch everybody next week and go celebrate World Water Day. I guess we'll go home and drink a bottle of water. Right, Mike?
Absolutely.
That's what we'll do. Anyway, everybody have a good week. And remember, the most important thing to do all week is to think blue. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, 106.5 FM, and now 102.3 FM.